Hello, and welcome to Improbable Things. I'm J. Grace Pennington, and this is my podcast where I share 6 improbable thoughts before breakfast. And for me, that means thoughts about reading and or writing. So we are having a rainy morning over here, which is not only very much needed, but makes for a really nice, cozy, bookish atmosphere, in my opinion. So I am ready to get started discussing all that good bookish stuff with y'all. So number 1, I mentioned that I've been releasing Firmament Eleftheria, book 7 in the Firmament series on Kindle Vella, and so chapter 10 just came out yesterday, and I think it's going pretty well. I've been promoting it as I can, and one thing that's really a kind of a cool thing that they have on Vella, at least, I think it's cool. I don't know how much other people have been enjoying it because there's nowhere that I can view these results, but they allow you to put polls at the end of each episode or each chapter, and it's just a few characters. You can just put up to 4 options, and then you have the poll close at a certain point so everyone can see the results. But I think it's a great way to engage readers, so you can do whatever you want. Usually I found I would either ask people's opinion on something that had happened in the chapter, or their opinion of what they thought should happen in the next chapter or ahead in the book. And so again, I don't really have a way to see how many people are participating in the polls, unfortunately. Maybe that's something, they can add in to the dashboard at some point. But I have had some readers say that they really are liking that. And I think it's such a great way to try to engage with readers. You have a way where people can read a little bit at a time and, sort of all be reading at the same pace, if they're reading it as it comes out. And so being able to actually participate in a way by answering these polls, I think is a really fun idea. And I'm glad that I took the time to create polls for each chapter. Number 2, I'm still working on finishing up Humanoid, book 8, and it's going slowly but surely. At this point, I'm just trying to push through the first draft because I am really aware that the part I'm writing now is going to need some major work later. Because for one thing, I know there's some inconsistencies, things that I either forgot or changed my mind on partway through. But I also and you never know, because sometimes perspective changes when I go back and look at it later. But I'm pretty sure the stuff I'm writing right now is super boring and possibly somewhat repetitive. So I'm aware that for some or all of those reasons, I am going to have to do a lot of rewriting. But right now, I just need to get through this draft. It's already been sitting around unfinished long enough, and I need to follow my own advice, which the number 1 advice I'm constantly giving to other writers is just to push through, get your story down on paper or computer or whatever, and then edit later. Because that's always going to be the starting point, is just getting it out, getting it there, and then you can always, no matter how bad it is, it can be fixed later, but you can't fix it if it's not there. So just got to finish up this draft, and then later I can take a look at the big picture of the story and see what needs to be fixed. So I'm plowing through, hoping that there's really not that much left. So I'm hoping in the next week or 2, I can finish up that draft. Number 3, I have been building in time to promote my books into my schedule, which, at this point in my life means doing it during nap time. So I shared last week how I had really come to the revelation that one reason I was avoiding promoting my books is not only that it does take time, which is a sacrifice, of course, but also that I have a fear of how people will respond and react to my books and if they won't like them. And I just had some insecurities about that. And so I had to come to terms with that and realize that if I'm wanting to put my books out there for people, I'm going to have to face that possibility of rejection and just be vulnerable to that. And so that means prioritizing promotion and marketing. And so I've been doing a little bit of that each day, and I have some different categories like promoting audiobooks, promoting my novels, submitting short stories to magazines, just various things I can do, basically anything that's furthering putting my writing out there to get in the eyes of more people is what I kind of place in that category. So I take usually at least an hour each day, sometimes maybe an hour and a half. Again, it all kind of depends on how nap time goes and what other chores I have to do that day. But I take at least an hour and just sometimes I'll submit to promotion sites or, even, some paid promotions and ads, or I will, I have some different ideas of things. Like I might try to get some more blog, spots on other people's websites, some interviews and guest posts, because I've always loved doing that. And besides just not prioritizing marketing, it's been hard because I don't have access to my own author website right now, which I'm still working on. But because of that, I feel, a little bit like, well, it's harder because I can't even do my own blog posts, but, I can still promote on social media. So if I do a guest post on someone else's website, hopefully I can still benefit them by sharing on social media, whatever posts I do. So anyway, I'm going to try to just do more of those things, and just really continue to push through those insecurities and take the time and make it, if it really is important to me to have people read my work, then I've got to do the work and get it in front of them. So I think it's going pretty well. But again, I just started doing this, so we'll kind of see where it goes. The number 4 is continuing in the library saga of me and my little girls. I took them to the library yesterday morning, and we used to just go and play, and then we would go and read a few books while we were there, and now we've started checking out books. And every time we go, we get more. Like I think we checked out like 8 books and 2 movies or something like that this past time. And it's just been really fun. We'll get home and read the books. We'll usually read them maybe like 2 or 3 times throughout the week, and then get to go check out more. But as I've also shared about, the hard part is there are just so many books that are not acceptable for our family. And there's a wide variety of reasons why, but there's just a lot of books obviously out there that I don't want my children reading. So if we're at the library, I just tell Violet, she has to bring me a book to check before she reads it, because she loves to go and just like get a book and, she can't read, but look at it and then, put it back. And she knows, where to put it on the reshelf, area, and it's super cute. But just because you never know, I have her bring me the books to check. And then if they find a book they want to take home, then I just like flip through it real quick before I decide if we're going to take it home or not, assuming it's not one that I'm already familiar with. But I was thinking, for now, their books are short enough that I can do that really quickly. I can just glance through it and basically have read it, the whole thing. And, it's all previewed and ready for them to look at. But I always remember, and I remember this when I was a kid, having to wait for my mom to preview books, because I was a voracious reader back then as much as now, and just having to wait if we got a new book that she wasn't sure about for her to read it was always a struggle for me. And just knowing like we're gonna get to that place too, because obviously I'm busy, and I definitely have the feeling that Violet is going to be, a big reader as well. And so thankfully there are a lot of good, children's and middle grade books, like classic books and things like that I already know are good, so I can keep her fed for a while on those. But I'm just sort of, it's good that I'm building reading into my schedule, and it's good that I'm a really fast reader because I do read very quickly. Like I read through Brave New World in like 4 or 5 days. And so for children's books and middle grade books, I should be able to read them very quickly, hopefully for her. Not that it's a bad thing, like, if she has to learn to be patient, then that's fine too. But I want to encourage her reading. And so I just know there's going to come a time where I can't just flip through the book real quick and know that it's fine. Like I'll actually have to take some time and read through an actual book. So, yes, but since she can't even read yet, it's going to be a while before we get there, but just looking ahead. So number 5 on my currently reading, I actually just finished up Aesop's Fables, just continuing the read across left to right, top to bottom of my bookshelf. That was what was next. I had a really pretty copy that I'd gotten a while back. I don't know, I think I picked it up at half-price books or something. I don't even remember. But I thought, I'll read that. And I just read it. Just took me a couple days. And I'd read it before as a kid, but it had been a while. And so I enjoyed it. It's just so thought-provoking, and it's such an interesting mix of stories. Like, some of them get really weird with some of the Greek gods and stuff in there. But they're all interesting, and it got me thinking too, just, so many of them, not all, but they will have like the moral stated clearly afterwards, which we tend to frown upon in storytelling. But, I think what makes it work is that is the whole point of the stories. Like, these are not stories to entertain. They are stories to teach you something, and that going into it. So your expectation is that you are wanting to learn something from the story. So I usually found, like, you'll read the story, probably have a pretty good idea of what it's teaching you, but then you read the moral, that's clearly stated in a little sentence after the story, and then you kind of go, oh, okay, and maybe like glance back over the story, and it just kind of gives you another chance to look at what you're getting out of it. And so I liked that, and there was a few that really did sort of make me think and stick with me that I didn't remember from having read through before. So I'm glad I did that, and just glad to have something quick to boost my reading count also. So number 6, for my ramble and longer thoughts for the day, another currently reading of mine is I'm reading The Road by Cormac McCarthy for my book club. So I got the book from the library, a hardback copy, and I sat down, I think 2 or 3 days ago, to start reading it. And I made it to about page 5 and absolutely could not handle it. And I was just like, there is no way I'm going to be able to read this whole book. And the reason is, if you've never read it, it has, I would say, a very modernist interpretation of grammar and punctuation, in the sense that there's not much of either. And so, for instance, when there's dialogue, there are no quotation marks, and some of it will not be off like in its own paragraph, the normal way. And also, I can handle sentence fragments and things like that here and there for emphasis or, for drama's sake. But I would say probably like 2/3 of the sentences were not real sentences. Like, there's no subject. It was just basically fragments or clauses, and so many of them, like, it was so distracting to try to read, because I'm constantly starting off reading this sentence looking for, subconsciously looking for a subject and, the verb and all that stuff that I know from reading sentences my whole life, and not finding it. And then you're like, wait, what's happening? And I kept having to like go back and read. And same for like, was suddenly someone's talking, but since there was no quotation marks, I would have to realize later that it was someone talking and go back and look at it again. Like, it was so distracting. And so finally, I say finally, it didn't take long. Like I said, I think I got to page 5. I just was like, you know what? I bet an audiobook would be better, because then I won't be able to tell there's no quotation marks, and I probably won't really be able to tell about the sentences either, because instead of breaking off into a new sentence, it will just sound like a clause, like a perfectly normal clause that's attached to the previous sentence. And sure enough, I found an audiobook on Hoopla that is really good. The reader is great, and it's much easier to just engage with the story and listen to what's happening instead of being constantly distracted by all of this weirdness. And it did get me thinking, and I know that this is, a very artsy way to write, and it's very popular, I would say, in some circles, and like I said, there's a lot of modernist literature that's like this. But in my opinion, I've always considered that sort of writing to be arrogant in a way, because I feel like it's almost like, and I'm not speaking for Mr. McCarthy because I don't know anything about him or his attitude. I'm just saying the whole general subject. And it's like this way of writing in general has this sort of attitude of being like, well, I really know better than the rules that have been established. Me and my writing are too special to be conformed and, bound by these conventions. And we really need to break free of it. Like, it just has this whole vibe of just, like I said, to me, it's arrogance. And I've seen the same thing, there'll be the same thing with story structure. Like, they'll be like, well, I know it's supposed to have, there are these certain rules of story structure where you're supposed to have the inciting incident, and you're supposed to have, the dark night of the soul or whatever. There's things that work in stories, but I'm really too good for that and too special for that, is how it comes across to me. I don't need to follow these rules that have been discovered or implemented and that, over all this time. And I will say, it's obviously not a black and white thing. Like, these rules are not from the Bible. Like, these are rules that are made up, but they are made up for a reason. Like, we have sentence structure, and we have things like quotation marks for a reason, and that is so that our writing will be ordered and clear. And moving from order into chaos is not progress, for one thing. And for another thing, now it's one thing to have your readers take effort to discover things, not talking down to them, not spelling things out too clearly. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about where you're making your readers work harder to read your story unnecessarily. So things like having to figure out whether it's dialogue or narration. Like, you should not be putting your reader through that. You should be seeking to make the story clear rather than, more convoluted. And so I don't know, I just feel like it really does a disservice to the reader and to the story